Hello everyone and welcome back to the Beatles Forever. I'm sorry for the delay in the videos. I've been having some life-changing moments happening for me, and it's had me in a bit of chaos, so I'm hoping soon everything's going to be settled and I'll be back to doing more and more videos. So today I did have a chance to do one, so I'm so glad about that. Today we're going to look back at the friendship between John Lennon and Stuart Sutcliffe. They had a mutual admiration for each other and became great friends. How did they meet? John was introduced to Sutcliffe by Bill Harry, a mutual friend, when all three were studying at Liverpool College of Art. According to Lennon, Sutcliffe had a marvelous art portfolio and was a very talented painter who was one of the stars of the school, and he helped Lennon to improve his artistic skills and with others work with him when Lennon had to submit their work for exams. So this was according to the Wikipedia article about Stuart. And Stuart was a gifted student, and the school he went to knew it. A teacher named Arthur Ballard would leave his College of Art to teach Stuart 2 times a week. Stuart didn't want to work in the college. He preferred his own studio, which was a cramped studio in a basement of a house on Percy Street. Ballard would talk, and Stuart would keep painting. He worked on the large canvases, which wasn't popular during that time. So Stuart was born from Scottish parents. His father was a senior civil servant, and his family moved from Edinburgh to Liverpool during the war. The father worked on a merchant ship, and when he was home, he was a heavy drinker and cruel to his wife, Millie. Stuart saw what was happening at a young age. He decided to be his mother's protector, and he would also help her with the younger kids. So John, at first, was fascinated by what Stuart wore. Stu, in 1959, didn't dress like a teddy boy or a jazz cellar fan. He wore tight jeans, pink shirts with printed pin collars, and pointed boots with high elasticized sides. Well, the art college wasn't too thrilled about how he dressed, but they knew how brilliant he was as an artist, so they let him get by with it. So Stuart inspired John in his studies. Stu was committed to his painting and to art and literatures, and Stuart taught John about the French Impressionists and Van Gogh. Stu and Bill Harry both sat on the Students' Union Committee, so they were able to get John, Paul, and George to play at local dances. The only problem was that John and George played electric guitars, but they didn't have an amplifier, so Stuart came to the rescue and convinced the committee to loan them amplifiers as long as they were not taken away from the college. So Stuart was inspired by rock and roll, but only in a romantic and visual way. He was dying to join a band, even though he didn't know how to play an instrument. John and Stuart were becoming closer friends, and John thought he could join the group. The other members of the band bought instruments and learned to play them, so he thought, well, Stuart should be able to do that too, but Stuart didn't have any money to buy an instrument. But good luck was soon to come Stuart's way. There was an art exhibition, and one of Stuart's paintings sold for 65 pounds. It was with this money that he bought a bass guitar after John and Paul persuaded him to, and he joined the group. According to Wikipedia, Sutcliffe's prior musical experience consisted of singing in the local church choir in Hoyton, and his mother had insisted on piano lessons for him since the age of 9, playing bugle in the air training corps, and his father having taught him some chords on the guitar. So Stuart and John continued their friendship. Stuart had lost his basement residence when he decided to paint all the furniture white. So Stuart suggested to John that they move into their friend Rod Murray's flat in Gambier Terrace. John didn't stay there very long, but his friendship with Stuart continued. They spent most of the day together, and they went to the Jacaranda coffee bar where Stu would sketch in crayon while John flirted with the waitresses. Next up, there was a fight in Liverpool. There were clubs in Liverpool where fights could break out. It could be something as simple as playing Chuck Berry song when they wanted to hear Little Richard. Well, one night the Silver Beatles were ambushed as they made their way through the car park back to their own van. Stuart was knocked down and got kicked in the head, and John helped to rescue him, fighting off Stuart's attacker so hard that he sprained his wrist, and I think he broke his pinky finger. Stuart's mom said that there was blood all over their rug when Stuart came home and that she wanted to call a doctor, but he said no, and that if she called a doctor, he would leave the house and never return. So now we have trouble in the band. Stuart and the group went to Hamburg, and everyone in the band was excited, everyone but Stuart. He knew that he wasn't a musician. Sutcliffe's playing style was elementary, mostly sticking to root notes of chords. Harry, an art school friend and founder and editor of the Mersey Beat newspaper, complained to Sutcliffe that he should be concentrating on art and not music, as he thought that Sutcliffe was a competent musician whose talents would be better used in the visual arts. And while Sutcliffe is often described in the Beatle biographies as appearing very uncomfortable on stage and often playing with his back to the audience, the drummer at the time, Pete Best, denies this. He recalls Sutcliffe as being unusually good-natured and animated before an audience. So that was a new one, because I've always heard that he had turned his back because he didn't want anybody seeing that he didn't know how to play the chords. Okay, Stuart felt that he was only in the band because he was John's best friend, and he knew that Paul didn't like him, and he wanted to take over on bass guitar because he felt he could do it better. And also, Sutcliffe felt guilty about neglecting his art studies. Sutcliffe's profile grew after he began wearing Ray-Ban sunglasses and tight trousers. Sutcliffe's high spot was singing Love Me Tender, which drew more applause than the other Beatles and increased the friction between him and McCartney. And Lennon also started to criticize Sutcliffe, making jokes about his size and playing. Sutcliffe quit the band and decided to move to Hamburg to be with his girlfriend Astrid, who was German. And Paul got his wish and became the bass player. Next, we have that Stuart Sutcliffe dies suddenly. Stuart started to have problems with headaches and sensitivity to light. And according to Wikipedia, in February 1962, Sutcliffe collapsed during an art class in Hamburg. Kircher's mom had German doctors examine him, but they were unable to determine the exact cause of his headaches, and they suggested he return to the United Kingdom and have himself admitted to a hospital with better facilities. However, after arriving there, Sutcliffe was told that nothing was wrong, so he returned to Hamburg. He continued living with the Kirchers, that was Astrid's parents, but his condition soon worsened. After he collapsed on 10th of April 1962, Kircher took him to the hospital, riding with him in the ambulance, but he died before they arrived. The cause of death was a brain hemorrhage, specifically a ruptured aneurysm resulting in cerebral paralysis due to severe bleeding in the right ventricle of the brain. He was 21 years old. In the book Shout, the doctors told Astrid that Stuart's brain was expanding and getting too big to float around in the skull. It was a rare medical condition. If he had lived, he would have been blind and maybe paralyzed and unable to paint. Astrid said if that was the case, he would rather be dead. Well, the Beatles were devastated by the death. George and Pete couldn't stop crying, and Paul felt bad about the fighting he had with Stu and saying things about him. But John, he didn't show any emotion, but I have a feeling he felt abandoned again, just as he did when his mom died. Stu's mom felt that John had no feelings about it, but in one instance he asked her if he could keep a long woolen scarf that Stuart had worn around his neck during those winter days when they were together in Liverpool, and she did give it to him. According to Wikipedia, although Lennon did not attend the funeral or send flowers, his second wife, Yoko, remembered that Lennon mentioned Sutcliffe's name very often, saying that he was my alter ego, a spirit in his world, a guiding force. So Stuart was a great artist and a wonderful friend to John Lennon, and I'm sure Stuart's death affected John more than anyone could ever know. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, if you could give it a thumbs up, that would be great. And if you haven't joined, if you could, that would be good too. So I hope everybody's been having a good day. And tune in again soon to the Beatles Forever. Thank you. Bye.